Okay, so hi everyone. This is video 1 of 30, and we're just going to do an episode of my life from the beginning up until now, like how I got to where I am today. So the first thing that I can recall of my memory is my mother and I and my sister were in an apartment building in an apartment, and I just remember her looking for her money, and she was panicking, and there was a guy there, and he was in one of the rooms. There was 2 bedrooms. I can even remember like the layout and everything for some reason, and he stood at the doorway of the bedroom and kind of laughed at her as she was freaking out, panicking, like, where is my money? Like, where the fuck is my money? And when she saw him laughing in the doorway of the bedroom, she grabbed in the knife block, there's like the biggest knife. She grabbed one of those knives and she ran at him, and he slammed the door and he closed it and locked it. Are you fucking kidding me right now? So she ran at the door with that massive knife, and he slammed the door in her face, and she proceeded to stab the door and scream at him and tell him that she was going to kill him. And I remember my sister was in the other room. She was a baby, and I was just like old enough to kind of like, I guess I was maybe a little bit older than just old enough. I was definitely old enough to walk, and so I just remember going over to her. She was screaming, crying in the crib, and I was trying to comfort her as my mom proceeded to just tell this guy that she was going to kill him for taking her money. And then at some point, cops arrived, and I remember them just taking them away, and I think they put us with like a neighbor or something like that, or at least for a little bit while they like took care of like the whole situation. And then from that point on, I remember being in foster care and visiting my grandma, and this would be probably my second memory, like most like youngest memory. We were visiting my grandma. We were already in foster care, me and my sister, and I remember they were either like our nieces and nephews or something like that, or cousins, but they were taking us to go to 7-Eleven to get 5-cent candies. And I remember as we were crossing the street with them that my grandma came down the street, and she was running at us, and she was screaming at us, and she was telling us to go to someone else's house across the street. And she was like just frantic. She was like scared for her life. And so I remember kind of like running across the street, and as I was running across the street, I looked back and I noticed that my mother was coming behind her, and I just instinctively yelled at my mother, like, "Mommy," like, "Mom," because at this point in our lives, we weren't seeing our mother very much. And we crossed the street, we got to the gas station or the 7-Eleven or whatever it was, and then my grandmother came behind us, and my mother caught up to her, and at the middle of the intersection, she grasped onto my grandma, and she threw her down to the road in the middle of this intersection and just started smashing her head, I guess, the back of her head, into the cement, and screaming at her, like, "Why did you take my children? You took my children from me." Some sort of just craziness. And the cops came. I remember before the cops came, my sister started again crying and having temper tantrum, just freaking out. Obviously, she's young. I'm gonna sneeze. Oh my goodness. Whew. Okay. yeah, she started freaking out, crying, and um, my mother came over to her and then proceeded to choke her and tell her and scream at her to shut the fuck up. Um, and then the cops came and diffused the situation. I think that was the last time I was ever allowed to see my grandma because of that situation. So I don't know. I just don't really remember like any memories from her. I only remember like toys from my grandma, and I don't know like where that sat in my memory bank. But the next thing I remember was um, being in a foster home. I just really remember that at first myself and my sister were, uh, the bad kids, and we were always getting in trouble, like over silly things. Like for example, I remember being in this room and my sister and I in this room on mattresses on the floor, and it was just two little mattresses, nothing else in the room. And we would always stay up past our bedtime and we would talk and we would get in trouble, and then we would be put in separate corners and just stand in the corner for however long. I don't know how long it was, but I remember that at some point she changed her mind on what she wanted to do to punish us in the winter time because it was so cold. She would place us outside with just our boots on, and we were living out in the country, and the wolves or coyotes, like I think the coyotes, yeah, they were just like howling all the time, and my sister just sat out there and cried. We would just freeze our ass off. I think it was like a stricter way of trying to get us to not stay up past our bedtime and talk. And I remember in our bare bedroom that we had like literally nothing. It was just the mattresses and our blankets. That's it. And all of the toys that our grandma gave us, for some reason, she placed them in a garbage bag and she placed them up top on the top shelf. So I can remember that. And somehow my sister Delilah got up into the closet and she got that bag down, and in it was one of those little green paint palettes that were like super popular as kids, like, and maybe they still are, but they came with one little brush and all these different colors, like two rows of paints like this size. And I remember that she somehow figured out how to paint the walls with it, and she just went like crazy with the paint. And yeah, I just remember her getting like crazy trouble, and my brother ended up in the foster home with us. And I remember, all I really remember was them just like dragging the kids down the hallway by their ears, screaming bloody murder. And so I was part of this kind of like, for some reason, I felt like an outsider or just like a bad kid or like punished for no reason. Like, for example, like us not having our gifts from our grandma. Like, I didn't really understand that, and I still don't understand that till this day. And but something happened where it just all changed for me, and I don't know what I did, but I want to say maybe I was performing well in school or something like that. But all of a sudden, I was one of the good kids, and I was favored, and I was taken out of that room. And I remember being placed in my own room, and I called it like the princess room. It was just so beautiful, like an amazing, beautiful bed, matching nightstands, and like cute little lights, lamps, beautiful bedding, and it was just like so amazing. And I got to go in that room, and then I just became like the favorite. And I was like very similar to their birth child. So their birth child was like super spoiled and obviously a favorite, but then I was like the second birth child. And I remember just getting so many gifts for my birthday and having lots of friends over and her taking so many photos of me. And not the same for my sister Delilah. And, you know, if I look back on it, I think like I was a child who tried to impress you. I was definitely trying to be on my best behavior. I tried to listen and do what you told me to do. And um, I mean, by no means was I perfect, but I did pretty good and on trying to do my best and behave well. My sister didn't really do that. She just lost control all the time. She was one of those children who threw temper tantrums, like crazy temper tantrums. So she just was always this. I don't know. I mean, I remember she told me even when we were young, she always told me that our mother told her that like the devil was in her or there was a demon inside her or something, and that really stuck with her for her whole life. And now that I am who I am today and I work with people healing them spiritually, I mean, I am certain that, yeah, there is some sort of dark force that is working within her because the things that she does is just absurd. So I remember just, yeah, becoming this like favorite child, and life was so great. And the only thing really beyond that was kind of weird was that there was some sort of like sexual energy between myself and the son. And